Right, this is the first of two videos on setting up the new style modio together with the Mach 3 plugin to drive modios. The hardware I've got here is a new board which can be recognized because its switching power supply doesn't have the big regulator with its heatsink, so that's a new board. The first board, so this is connected up to the RS-232 via this ribbon cable here. If you've got more than one board, needs to be the new style board. Others can be the old style, and so here's an old one. It's got the linear regulator with its heatsink on it. Now on the new board I've got a toggle switch and that is connected to terminal 12 to ground, so I've just got one input on it. And on the old style board I've got analog 1 connected to this potentiometer, which is powered with the ground and the +5. I've got a push button switch which is connected between data in 1 and data out 1. That is going to be one crossing of a keyboard matrix switch. And I've got an MPG which is connected up to these terminals and powered from this side of the old modio. They've both got LCDs, and so that's the test setup. Now let's fire up Mach 3 and start configuring the system. I'm going to create a brand new profile. So we start from scratch. We're going to clone it from Mach 3 mil, modio vid for this video. And having created it, I'm going to load Mach 3 running it. Now, we first of all have to tell Mach 3 that we're using Modbus, and we have to configure the Modbus. So we'll go to ports and pins, define that we're having Modbus input-output, and define that we're not using the old style Modbus, but we're using the new plug-in to drive it. So we apply that. Now that won't take effect until I reload Mach 3. So if I go to set up Modbus control, I get the old style setup. If you get that, then you need to reboot Mach 3. So I'm going to close it down, go into it again. This is the profile we're using. And now, if we configure, set up the Modbus control, we get this table rather than all those checkboxes and things that we had before. Right, now then, I am plugged into COM port number 1 of my computer. It is configured at 57600 baud. It uses 8 bits, 1 stop bit, no parity. I'm going to say 100 millisecond timeout for errors in the Modbus configuration. I'm not connecting it via RS-485. The two boards are connected like that, but not the computer, and I want it to run. So now I can access Modbus devices. Now you may want to satisfy yourself that all is well by doing test Modbus at this stage. So I've got port number 1, 57600. Now I'm actually going to look at my slave address 2. I'm going to look at the MPG register because that's the easiest to look at. So I open that, I read the MPG register, and as I click the MPG, if I got it right, then I would be able to see. I wonder what I've got configured wrong. It's not 1157, it's 1150. So there is the value of the MPG, and as I click it, its value changes. So I know that I'm talking to the Modbus. Now you wouldn't necessarily need to do that, but so now that has Mac talking to Modbus devices in general. So now we need to tell it that we've got some modio, which are examples of Modbus devices, and so we will go to the plugin, we will enable it, and it is as well, after changing plugin enables, to go out and back in again. So I'll go out and back in again. Right, now we're going to want to actually do things, so let's go out of eStop by going offline, and I'm now going to configure my plugin. We haven't told it anything about the modios that I've got connected, so let's define the first one. I find it, you can call them what you like, I find it convenient to call it numbered with the same as the slave port address. So it's on COM port 1, and the new modio, I've got the switch set to 1, it's got an LCD, and I'm going to use high-speed polling. Right, we've got two modios, so I'm going to new another one. So modio 2, this is going to be slave port 2. I'm going to not define it with high-speed polling, just well, now I will actually. It's got the MPG on, so it's probably as well too. So now Mac 3 knows about two modios. If they were new modios, we wouldn't know how they were configured. They in fact usually come with the switch position set to 0. That is the default configuration, and in the default configuration you just get digital inputs and outputs. We want to use special inputs and outputs, so we can't use the default configurations. So I'm not on switch 0, I'm on switch 1, and I need to configure what is actually connected to my modios, because the processor in the modio needs to know what's connected to its pins. One pin can do lots of different jobs depending on this configuration. So let's configure modio 1. This is the old one, which has got virtually nothing connected to it. It's got an LCD where we haven't got an analog connected to it. We're going to use its discrete functions. We haven't got any MPGs. We haven't got the frequency counter. Let's, for the sake of argument, leave its outputs blinking. We don't need an error gap, although, well, that's actually the default, so we're happy with that. Let's write that configuration into the flash memory on the modio. So send is going to send it to the modio. You get a little bit of flashing on its red and green LEDs, and that configuration won't take effect unless we reset it. So I reset it. Its LCD now displays the configuration. I've got the serial number, I've got the baud rate it's running at, I've got what ID, that's to say which slave address it is, and I've got the line saying how it's configured, DALM, blah 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 blah. So that modio is set up how I want it. Now modio 2, well, let's configure its hardware. I've been playing with this before, so it ought to be configured correctly already. It's got an LCD. We're going to use the analog inputs. We're going to use the discrete input outputs, and I've got one encoder MPG connected on to, that's jack 10, terminals 14 and 15. I'm not using the other one, so I don't need to define that. I'm using the matrix key scanning, so I enable that, and I'm not blinking any of the outputs. So I send that configuration, I reset that modio, so we get a little bit of flashing on the lights, and its LCD tells me that it's serial number 17, its ID is 2, slave address 2, so that's all looking fine. So that has configured Mac 3, so it knows it's using Modbus. It's configured the two modios into Mac 3, so it knows what slave addresses they're at. It's configured the actual modio hardware with what peripherals I've got connected to it. So in fact that is ready to go. If we do a done and an OK, we would be ready to tell Mach 3 how to use these mod IOs. The red and green transmit receive lights are blinking on both mod IOs so that I've got communication going between them. Just before we exit this video, let me show you how the table that was blank has now got filled. We've got the name of the device, and it's got inputs, outputs, and because we enabled the LCD, it's got the LCD. They're enabled. It tells us what slave they are. It tells us what refresh rate we're at. We set both of them at the high speed refresh rate. It gives the address of the start of transfer of these Modbus variables in there, how many registers are going to be transferred. So this defines the polling function that Mach 3 is doing on the Modbus, the mod IO devices. So every 50 milliseconds it transfers the 9 input registers and sends the 2 output registers, and every 200 milliseconds it updates the LCD device. Now you can change the refresh rate in here by editing it and applying it. Supposing we decided that in fact it was perfectly alright because we hadn't got any MPGs or anything fast to change the new mod IO, the first one, to 100. If we apply that, that will now affect the polling. It makes the flashing lights on the polling look slightly strange because one of them is being polled at a different rate from the other. Right, I'll finish this video now. The second video will show how we can connect all these peripherals we've got on our mod IOs up to Mach 3.